Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge. At the stroke of midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. A moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends, and when the soul of a nation long suppressed finds utterance. These were the opening lines of the speech by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister and freedom fighter, delivered on the eve of India's independence towards midnight on 14th of August 1947. This speech, which is often known as Tryst with Destiny, remains one of the most celebrated speeches in modern history. In fact, few historic speeches achieve the grandeur and nobility of the one Nehru delivered that night. Actually, it captures the emotional and historical significance of India's independence as the nation set the tone for nation's future on the eve of its first independence. This speech must have propelled the words that India awakening to life and freedom at the stroke of midnight must have propelled the authors of the famous book Freedom at Midnight to name their book as Freedom at Midnight. In fact, I have a copy of this book since many years. It's one of the prized collections of my father's, and I read this book even as young as 15 or 16 years old when I was in high school. And once again, I read a few pages of this book last 5 to 10 years back. And now again, I have started reading this book, renewed from my interest from watching a recent web series. And I'll come to review of that web series later on. But first, let's look at the book and what the book is all about. The book is a chronicle illustrated with anecdotes and masterful character sketches of how the British came to India, how they conquered it, how they ruled it, and how finally, compelled by the forces of geopolitics and relentless pursuit of India's freedom struggle and the power of truth and non-violence spearheaded by Mahatma Gandhi, how finally the British were forced to leave the country, though they left it divided and bruised. It's a book co-authored by two famous iconic authors, Larry Collins and Dominique Lapierre. They were both journalists, which actually greatly influences their research-driven and vivid storytelling. In fact, none of them were British. They were a French-American duo. Dominique Lapierre was French and Larry Collins was an American, and the duo have had notable collaborations. Together, they have other notable books. In fact, some of them are about the most burning topics of the 20th century. It's Paris Burning, a gripping account of liberation of Paris during World War II. O Jerusalem, it was a detailed narrative of the birth of Israel. And The Fifth Horseman, a spectacular thriller of a novel about terrorist attack in New York City. And their work is actually distinguished by an immense attention to detail, thorough research. And as a matter of fact, their books are so good because there is a commitment to accuracy paired with literary finesse, and that is what makes their books highly engaging and educational. Since the publication of their last novel, the last joint work, Fifth Horseman, Collins has gone on to publish 3 best-selling novels, Fall from Grace, Mage, Black Eagles, and Lapierre published 2 non-fiction bestsellers, among others, The City of Joy and Beyond Love, among notable ones. City of Joy is about the city of Kolkata, which actually Dominique Lapierre fell in love with, and he came to stay in that city for a long period. Is no more with us in this world, but the legacy of the duo will continue to live with all the immortal works they have left behind. Now, so what is this book? What is this book all about? It's not just a book on history. It's not a book that just chronicle events. And certainly it is not just a book about partition, or it is not a book just about partition. It is about 2 nations, the colonial masters, the British, and Indians, or India, the land the colonial masters colonized and rightly called it jewel in their crown. What made the British rule another country that almost had 1/5 of humanity, and that too for more than 2 centuries? Let's dissect and delve deeper into the book and its narrative and its characters. The book focuses on early days of 1947 and also into 1948. In fact, the days leading up to India's independence and the immediate aftermath of that. A prevailing theme in the book is the partition of India, the creation of Pakistan, and the accompanying tragic tales of separation and mass-scale migration that accompanied partition, one of the prevailing themes in the book that has been detailed with heartbreaking truthfulness. The greatest, however, is the tribute to Mahatma Gandhi's vision. Gandhi's unwavering and relentless commitment to non-violence is often juxtaposed against the escalating wave of communal riots. The book poignantly describes Gandhi's efforts to reunite the communities. There were communities fighting amongst each other even as the nation was gearing up for independence and in the immediate aftermath of that Independence Day. Communities were fighting, there were mass-scale killings, there were slaughter of people, there was loss of humanity, and all these things. Gandhi was not celebrating the freedom of India. He was actually on the streets, he was in Kolkata, he was fasting, he was amongst people, he was in slums, and he was talking to people even in the face of grave challenges. So the book concludes with Mahatma Gandhi's assassination, symbolizing a painful end of an era that brought about a moment which actually dampened the euphoria of birth of a nation. In fact, the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi on the 30th of January 1948 marked a deeply emotional and transformative moment in the country and in the history of the nation. Gandhi had been a steadfast proponent of non-violence and communal harmony. It's an irony that he had to fall victim to the very hatred he had spent all his life combating. This devastating act left the nation in shock, creating an emotional void that transcended political and communal divisions. In fact, Gandhi's assassination left a profound emotional void and impact that evoked a sense of collective repentance, remorse amongst the warring communities, and it compelled them to move towards restoring peace and order. So the authors even go on to say that what Gandhi's last moment efforts couldn't do to restore peace, maybe his death infused a sense of order, a sense of repentance amongst these people, the very people for whom Gandhi dedicated his entire life. Now, Collins and Lapierre bring about a vivid representation of all these facts, and they have collaborated with a number of interviewers, a number of people from which they have taken interviews. They have collected large material of data, historical archives, and all this they lace with dramatic storytelling. The two writers are, however, very interestingly besotted with Lord Louis Mountbatten, and they present him as a larger-than-life hero. Apparently, what was important for the British was to have a man at the helm of affairs who could oversee the transfer of power to the people of its colony without shedding a single drop of British blood. Imagine, they were in this country for more than 200 years. They were brutal, they were ruthless, and they did everything they could do. But they wanted to leave the country in a sense of, in a situation where they could still be friendly with the country. India could be a part of Commonwealth, and the transfer of power should have been very smooth, which was not true with many of the colonies. The French had a difficult time in leaving their colonies all over the world at that point of time. And of course, the independence of India and the way British left the country set a new tone for the part of history, and a lot of colonies also got freedom at that point of time. Now, interestingly, despite their portrayal of Lord Mountbatten as a larger-than-life figure, and with the passage of time, neither the British nor majority of Indians seem to regard him with much significance. So it's puzzling how these two writers have portrayed him as such a wonderful war hero, larger than life figure, one of the predominant figures in the history of independent India, or in those days of pre-independence time. So maybe I think it was a gesture they wanted to express to that man, because he had provided them with enormous collection of archives, valuable materials that helped them to bring about this very work possible. So that might have been reason they must have felt very much thankful to him. Now, a larger point this book brings about in our minds is why and how the British came to rule over such a large mass of humanity. In fact, many Western experts often say that India as a nation did not exist because it was a large mass of humanity. There were many small kingdoms, larger to smaller kingdoms. The subcontinent was bound by certain ethos, practices, values, yet it was diverse, it was divided, and there was no single entity as a single country as far as the modern definition of nation states is concerned. So how was it when the British came to India, and what made British rule this country that had almost 1/5 of humanity for almost more than 2 centuries? Now, here comes the story of the Rajas and Maharajas, small to large kingdoms spread all over the continent, all over the subcontinent of this Indian subcontinent. It was their infighting that had brought the very British rule in India. Because before the British came, actually, the Rajas, Maharajas, Nawabs, Sultans, these were the people ruling India. The Mughals, of course, were there at the helm of affairs in Delhi, but there were a huge number of those rulers spread all over India. They were interconnecting networks, sometimes very disorganized, but they were the very people who couldn't protect the very people they were ruling over. And India fell into the hands of the British, but these rulers remained unlikely beneficiaries when the ordinary people suffered under the British rule. The princely rulers of India, a dazzling pantheon of silk-clad, jewel-encrusted, tiger-hunting demigods, often seated on their gilded thrones, remained aloof, gazing down at their subject struggles with an air of indifference. Very interestingly, Freedom at Midnight spares no words in depicting these illustrious figures as pivotal facilitators of colonial dominion or colonial rule of British on India. They were masters of opulence. They were majors in indifference. These rulers lived unrealistic lives as far as ordinary people were concerned. They had sprawling palaces. They had grand possessions. Their harems of the size of small villages. They lived under the patronage of British because they wanted the British to continue ruling India so that their kingdoms could indulge in the luxury and also under the protection of the British rule. But their subjects toiled under the weight of crushing poverty and the colonial taxes. These people were the British Raj's favorite sidekicks, these rulers, these Indian princes. Far from being mere victims, they were the masters of colonial manipulation. Many of these rulers were the empire's biggest fans. Not all of them, but most of them were. Some of them, of course, were different. They worked for the people of the nation. But most of them perfected the art of appeasement, trading sovereignty for honorary titles like, remember, one of the title one person of them got was Knight Grand Commander of the Most Excellent Order of British Empire. This almost sounds ridiculous. But why would they bother with messy concepts like freedom when they could get a lifelong protection of the British and a lifetime supply of imported scotch? That is the truth, and I believe they were the people who were responsible for keeping the nation under the British rule with an air of arrogance and indifference, and without really caring for the subjects of the nation.
The book also takes us on a very interesting narrative about Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan. Actually, Jinnah wanted to have separate electorates for Muslims to ensure their rights and representation. Later on, he wanted a separate state for Muslims However, Nehru, along with Patel and of course Mahatma Gandhi, they were all opposed to have separate electorates. They were all opposed to have a divided country. They envisioned a unified India where all citizens would have equal rights and representations. However, Jinnah didn't want all that, and ultimately he had his way. In fact, the book tells a very interesting revelation that Muhammad Ali Jinnah was suffering from advanced tuberculosis, and his X-ray was suggestive of that he was not going to make it for more than 6 months to 1 year. And had it been known to the Indian leaders, or for that matter Mountbatten, they all could have postponed the whole story of partition of India by a few months or a few years, so that the division of India could have been avoided.
There are very interesting anecdotes about Jinnah's meeting with new Viceroy Lord Mountbatten, and by Mountbatten's account, it was most of a disaster. It almost took the interview trying to unfreeze him. That was the remark Mountbatten had made afterwards. Interestingly, after the interview, after the meetings, they were supposed to take a series of photographs, and Jinnah had probably assumed that the lady Edwina Mountbatten would be standing between himself and Lord Mountbatten. However, it turned out that Jinnah was made to stand in between Mountbatten and his lady. Nevertheless, Jinnah had prepared a remark before. He had come prepared to say a rose between two thorns, and he nevertheless made that remark even when he himself was standing between Lord Mountbatten and the lady. However, nobody took it very seriously, and it all ended with a laughter. But that also says that how the relationship between Mountbatten and Muhammad Ali Jinnah never really got into great terms in course of time, and it remained more or less very complicated for most of the time. But why I'm telling all this? What is the relevance of this book in present times, when we have already reached 75 years of our independence, and much that had to be told has already been told? Remember, this book, or the whole concept this book represents, continues to hold relevance today, especially when viewed through the lens of socio-political landscape and the enduring impact of partition that we are still enduring at this point of time. This book also imparts us important leadership lessons that a person can stand up for truth and non-violence, and even with the force of truth and non-violence, one can achieve victory. And this serves as a timeless reminder of the enduring power of human spirit, especially more important in today's tumultuous world where such principles are far more crucial than ever. And it also imparts important relations about religious pluralism in an age where there is growing amount of communal tension. The book's portrayal of Hindu-Muslim conflict during the partition reminds us a cautionary tale about the perils of sectarianism and the necessity for fostering harmony even at most difficult times and against all odds. What are the silver linings of the British rule in India? Was the British rule really all bad, or there were certain good things about the British rule? The British rule, of course, was not all about exploitation. There were some unintended benefits. There were unintended benefits. We had the railways. We benefited from education system. The English education created a large class of thinkers and reformers who later challenged the colonial rule. And they gave us the legal system, they gave us infrastructure, ports, telegraphs, postal services. Remember, without the English, we would not have the postal services. And there were abolition of dangerous practices like sati, and there was a reformation of the Indian farming system. There were colonial ban on sati, there was child marriage, and all these things used to take place. Widow marriage could actually be encouraged. So all these things actually could be done with the advent of British rule and the advent of knowledge and Western exposure to Western ideas, exposure to wider world by the people of India, and political unity. By governing a fragmented piece of land, they actually brought all the pieces, all the kingdoms inadvertently actually under one single rule, and after the left we had one single country left, and that's why we're so proud of unity in diversity at this point of time. They also gave us an introduction to democratic ideals. Institutions like the Indian National Congress, intended as safety valves, of course, became the engines of independence at that point of time. However, the silver linings cannot and should not overshadow the immense suffering, exploitation, and economic devastation British rule has inflicted upon India, and these benefits, often incidental, came at a very high cost, and they were rooted in colonial self-interest rather than altruism. So, why would you read the book? Why should you read the book? Before I depart, before I say goodbye, let me tell you, read this book for its gripping narrative, and the book also comes in hard copy, soft copy, and also you can have a Kindle edition. The Kindle edition has got so many recent prologue and recent preface to the newer edition. About the author has updated and given how the book has influenced so many people, and the book has been with some latest introduction. Now, why should one read Freedom at Midnight 75 years after independence? If you're a reader of history, if you're a lover of history, if you're a lover of geopolitics, or if you're a lover of good books with research material that are authentic and written with literary finesse, then this is a book you must not miss. This book has a very gripping narrative. Overall, Freedom at Midnight is a compelling and informative book that provides a detailed account of India's independence movement. While it may have some limitations, the book is a must-read for anyone interested in the contemporary history of India, its geopolitics, and while it may have some limitations, the book is a must-read for anyone interested in Indian history, politics, and culture, and more importantly, history of the world in and around the time India got its independence. So stay tuned till next time we come up with a review of some exciting book having some geopolitical and historical significance, because that's the series I am focusing on as of now. And for you all, take care, stay safe, God bless you all.